Welcome. Today is the 11th day of Av, the 15th of August. We're going to be looking at the fifth reading of Parashat Va'etchanan, which means I made a plea, as we talked about on the first day of the week. And we're looking at Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 19 is where it starts. And Moses is recounting still the events of Mount Sinai and what that experience was like. Yesterday we dedicated some time to the phrase panim bepanim, which means face to face, literally, idiomatically, but literally means the inside of the inside. And we spoke about pleasure being the more internal faculty that a person has than will, and why will is internal and why pleasure is even more internal than that. And today Moses continues and he says, God spoke these words to your entire assembly at the mountain out of the midst of the fire, the cloud, and the mist. A great voice. Now we have two words which again have a idiomatic meaning, but also a literal meaning. And these two words are velo yasaf. It's describing the voice that God spoke with. Obviously, God doesn't speak with a voice, although it could be that it was heard in some way, but not with the ears. The ears are not the instrument with which one listens to the voice of God. One needs to hear with one's heart. Regarding this, we have this concept in the Tikkunei Zohar. The literature of the Zohar has many books in it. And one of the later books, we know is later, but it's based on the wisdom of the Zohar, is called Tikkunei Zohar, which would be like the clothing of the Zohar, or the addendums to the Zohar, like something that you add on the outside, you're embellishing it. And there in the introduction, it gives us one of the most important statements about hearing and about understanding. Hearing and understanding go together. We haven't really done this in an orderly fashion, but each one of the senses that we have corresponds to one of the sfirot. And hearing corresponds to understanding, bina. And in the introduction to the Tikkunei Zohar, he mentions bina liba uva halev mevin. That bina, understanding, which again is related to hearing, is in the heart, and with it, the heart understands. So what is he saying? He's saying that there's the regular understanding that a person gets from what he hears, but there's also the understanding of the heart. In the same way that there's what I see and what I see in my mind's eye. So when we talk about sight, we don't usually say that the sight is in the heart. We usually say it's the mind's eye. We don't say the heart's eye. That's in English. It could be that there is some basis for it. I don't want to dwell on this. But regarding understanding, there's the understanding of the heart. What's the understanding of the heart? That is the ability to perceive godliness in physical reality. On the face of it, physical reality cannot contain godliness because God is infinite and physical reality is finite. So you've got a contradiction, a paradox. But that's in the physical sense. But if you look at the physical world from the point of view of the the heart's understanding, the deeper understanding, then you can get a perception, an understanding of godliness in reality. So, all this was an introduction to what he's saying about the voice, that it was a great voice, velo yasaf. In Hebrew, these two short words, which literally would be translated as without end. Velo yasaf, or it could be translated as without end, meaning that they didn't have, it was an infinite voice. That's one possibility. The way the Rashi explains it is that this means that the voice doesn't end. The voice continues to be in the world. That's how Rashi says, Lo yasaf mitargaminan velo pesak. And it didn't end. It didn't pause. Now, when you hear pause, what do you understand? You understand that as God was speaking, he didn't stop and then add something more, and so on. That's one way of understanding pause, because we have pause on our audio equipment. From the time that we had cassette tapes, we had a pause button. So pause seemed to be like making a pause in between two things that you're saying, to give you time maybe to assess it, to think about it, so on. But here the meaning is quite different. The meaning here is that the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai is not a one-time event. That's what you need to take out of this. That it's not that God spoke once, and now you and I and everybody else who's living 3,300 years later has to take it on faith that this is what God said. That's not the understanding that we have of this verse. By the way, Moses said the exact same words in Exodus he didn't say them, sorry, the Torah said them in Exodus when it described the giving of the Torah the first time in Parsha Yitro, Jethro. What does it mean? What does this mean? There are certain things that are timeless, meaning they're eternal. They're continually reverberating through reality. There is like this concept of the shot heard around the world, right? So what's the idea there? That it's limitless in terms of space. The entire world heard this shot. There's something like that regarding the splitting of the Red Sea, that the entire world knew that the sea had been split. Regarding the giving of the Torah, it also says velo yasaf, that it was limitless, it was without end, meaning that it was heard around the world. What do we mean by it was heard around the world? That all the people in the world at that moment experienced the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai to a certain degree, and God asked, do you want to receive this Torah? Do you want to join me in this covenant that I'm making on the Torah? Do you want to live by the Torah? And there were many people who said yes. There were entire nations that said no. The entire nation of Israel said yes. Many of the individuals around the world said no. But many also said yes. The problem was that entire nations didn't say yes. And so we have this concept of a convert in Judaism being someone whose soul actually said yes and continues to hear the words spoken at Sinai all the time. Now, again, it's not hearing here because it's not the type of voice that you can hear. It's not, I don't know if you can pick it up with any instruments. I wouldn't put it as an impossibility, but I don't know of any instrument that can pick this up today. What's the instrument that picks this up? The heart. That a person knows that these words were spoken to me. Honor your father and mother as God commanded you, so that your days be long, and so that He benefit you on the land that God has given you. There are people who hear this. They understand this intuitively. There's people who understand, do not murder, intuitively. People who understand, do not commit adultery, intuitively. They're not necessarily Jewish. They didn't learn it just from culture. They actually have an inner voice that says, these things are wrong. I need to live a moral life. And they say, where did I get this from? So I think, without question, everybody comes to the conclusion, I must have received it from the people around me. I must have learned it from someone. But the truth that the Torah is saying is that there were many people who heard this everywhere and in every generation. They hear these words, and they're not taught this by their culture. They're not taught this by their surroundings. Even if they heard it from their surroundings, it doesn't reverberate as something true and eternal unless it really touches their heart and they hear it inside their heart. So we have this concept in Judaism that every convert is not a convert. It's actually called, he's not called a non-Jew who converted, he's called a convert who converted. What do you mean he's a convert? When did he convert? he actually already converted. He already converted when he heard the original words being spoken. His soul, or her soul, heard these words being spoken at Mount Sinai 3,300 years ago. But again, it's not 3,300 years ago. It could be my soul is new in a certain sense. Maybe I'm just here for the first time. But these words ring true. They ring true because I hear something deeper in them. Do not give false witness against your fellow. Do not desire your fellow man's wife, nor may you desire a fellow man's house. But they also hear words like that God created the world in 7 days. What's that for? So that we know that the seventh day is holy. That they understand the concept of the sanctity in time. Not everybody understands that. There's people who say, no, all the days are the same. The only difference might be that, okay, there's a day when I have off from work. That's not sanctity, that's just a good time. But the people who understand this, they actually are hearing Sinai right now. Now this whole concept that there are words that are constantly in the air of the world is not new. When you think about it, this is exactly what science has done very successfully in the last 400, 500 years since Galileo, realizing that there's a language that nature speaks, and that language can be understood if you understand mathematics. And so Galileo was the first one to come and apply mathematics to nature, and to come and say, I can decipher the language that nature is constantly speaking. What language is it speaking? Well, in his time, it was mostly gravitation, mechanics, that balls roll down an incline at a certain speed, and he could formulate F equals ma, and so on. He could figure this out because the words that created nature, when God created reality, still reverberate through nature. But it's not enough for a human being. It's true, it's very interesting, and it's very real, and we live by it. But it's not enough. We also have our moral side, our soulful side. And that has words that are reverberating through reality also. By the way, when was the Torah given? So it's true that the revelation in time was 3,300 years ago. But when we say that this voice is one that doesn't end, it's also true that it doesn't start. Meaning, it's something that is infinite. It's always been in reality. Just like nature has always been what's propped up physical reality. So the Ten Commandments, so the giving of the Torah, so the Torah itself is what has been propping up reality in the moral sense, in the soulful sense, in the spiritual sense, since God created the world. It just happens to be that at that date, on the 6th of Sivan, when in 2448, when the Jewish people heard the Torah being given, they said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will hear, and we will do, and we will hear. When they were willing to accept it, that's the day that we say, that's when the Torah was given. But the Torah wasn't really given in any sense. It was always there. It's still there. So what we're saying is that there are words, the words of the Torah, that God spoke. And God doesn't speak in the sense of a person speaking like me. It's 15 minutes, it has a beginning, it has an end. When he spoke, it was all spoken at once, and it was always there. And it's still there. Every day a person can hear the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. It's not with the ears. It's an inner sense in the heart. And when you hear that, and you hear, I am Havaya, I am God, your God, who brought you out of the house of out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage, when you hear those words, you become a free person. You become a free person because you realize that the destiny of human beings is to be only under God, not to be servants or slaves of other people. The moment you understand that, the moment you understand the promise of freedom, which is not the freedom to just do whatever you want, it's the freedom to serve God. The moment you hear those words inside of you and they resonate as true, you've actually heard the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. Because that's what it really means. So with that, we'll end today. There's a lot more to say about these words, V'lo Yasaf, but I hope you've given a certain sense of how this is explained in the Kabbalistic and Hasidic commentaries. Thanks for joining. Hope to see you tomorrow.